So, Jai Bhim and Namo Buddhaya to all of you. Today, we are entering into the third session of our 3 days online seminar on comparing the thoughts of uh, Ashok and Babasaheb Ambedkar. And we have been going through a very interesting journey so far in order to understand the thoughts of both these great men and their mission. And today I have prepared a presentation which I'm going to put up in a minute. But before that, I would like to say that this topic has been of immense significance and importance to not only us, but I think throughout our country, the challenges that we are facing today, I think we can find a lot of those solutions or methods in both Ashoka's and Baba Sahib's writings and mission. At the same time, I think the world needs Babasaheb and Ashoka more than ever. And we are going to see how that is the case. So let me share the presentation. Share. Okay. Can you see the presentation?
Yeah, we can see.
Good.
Yes.
Great. So let's begin with the title Ashok and Babasaheb, Saddhamma for Just Society, Prabuddha Bharat. So I have given this title in order to move ahead with what we have been discussing for last two sessions. And if you look at the this very interesting Prabuddha Bharat, dated 29 September 1956, that's about 1 month before. Like, it's in the it was, as you say, as you can see, that it was weekly, and that weekly had been a mouthpiece of the Ambedkarite sort of a mission. And this is laid out very beautifully here. If you see, on one hand, there is a quotation from Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. It's in Marathi, but I'm going to translate it into English, some of the key parts of it. But people who are familiar with Devanagari, they can easily understand what's written here. So on one hand, there is Babasaheb's quotation, which is very important. And on the another hand, there is a quotation from Emperor Ashok from his ninth rock edict. And the layout is very interesting. And here is Babasaheb's photo, and there is a picture drawn by Babasaheb Ambedkar, which has appeared here in this issue of Prabuddha Bharat, 29 September 1956. And the Buddha era is also noted there, the first year of the Buddha, 2500 years, after the Buddha's enlightenment. So that's like the Buddhist era. So I found this very interesting way of putting it in front of all of you to make sense of Babasaheb, Ashok, Dhammachakra Pravartan, and so many things that we are often confused with. So let's begin with that. And let me now go to Babasaheb's understanding and Ashoka's ninth rock edict, the kind of quotations that we have seen in the Prabuddha Bharat. So here is Babasaheb Ambedkar, where he says, he has of course written in Marathi there, the quotation is Marathi, but here we can look at it in English version translation. There is no religion in the world like Buddhism. That's what Babasaheb says. Social inequality has no place in it. I am convinced that if man wants to find true happiness, satisfaction, and liberation in life, he can find it only in, very interesting, huh? He can find only in Buddhism. If India wants to exist with dignity in the world, it must accept Buddhism. This is the only way. That's what Babasaheb Ambedkar says here. He says that this is the only way. And look at the quotation which was quoted here. If you see on this side, here Ashoka's quotation is there, and here Babasaheb's. So I read Babasaheb's quotation, and Ashoka's quotation goes like this: there is no generosity or kindness like Dhamma, generosity and Dhamma kindness. Therefore, a friend, a kinman, or a companion should be encouraged for Dhamma, generosity, and Dhamma kindness, for this is the highest generosity and kindness. So this is what is the view of Emperor Ashoka, and on other hand, there is a view of Babasaheb Ambedkar. And we know this very important quotation of Babasaheb Ambedkar, where he says that to preach and propagate Buddhism is the real service to humanity. In Marathi, he says, Buddha Dharmaचा प्रचार आणि प्रसार हीच खरी मानव सेवा होय. Only real service that we can do to the humanity is by preaching and propagating the Buddha's Dhamma. And in Rock Edict 4, point number G, these notations are modern notations, just for the reference, where Ashoka says, giving instructions in the Dhamma is, after all, the most important task in one's life. So you see, broadly, the vision of Babasaheb Ambedkar and Emperor Ashok, they coincide together, as you can see it very clearly from these two quotations. So let me take you visually to the Prabuddha Bharat, and you see, on one hand, we have Babasaheb's quotation, on the other hand, we have Emperor Ashok's quotation, and then I got them translated here. And you see, there is a parallelism between what these two great giants of the thinkers thought about Buddhism. And both of them thought that there is no other important task than giving instruction in the Dhamma. Babasaheb, in fact, said that only the real service to humanity is to preach and propagate Buddhism. Now, just to bring to you what I'm going to do today is a kind of a summary of what I'm going to do today in the course of my presentation. Like Ashoka and Babasaheb Ambedkar as transformational leaders. They were not just leaders, but they were somebody who had this great ability to transform the world around them. And both of them, believed in Dhamma Acharan. In fact, you find this word Dhamma Acharan in the Ashokan edicts. And by the way of comparison, this is not really a comparison. Actually, this is what they both, stood for. So, for example, both of them, their lives were dedicated to Dhamma. And they both said that we have to lead by example. Ashoka says very beautifully, says that I teach what I practice. And because of that, the Dhamma is growing. That's what Ashoka says. And that is what Babasaheb Ambedkar had done. He has led by his own example, by embodying the very virtues or the values that were taught by the Buddha. So I think this is a very significant point here that we are looking at in terms of this, both of them embodying the values that they thought very dear to them. Both had a very deep love for the Buddha, very deep love for the Buddha. And in fact, Ashoka said, our Buddha, to when he addressed the Shakyamuni Buddha, he said, our Buddha, Mana Buddha, our Buddha. And we know that Babasaheb Ambedkar used to say, my Buddha was so wise. And whenever both of them talked about Buddha or thought about Buddha, their hearts were full of emotions. That's what we can call them the real Shraddha, the faith in the Buddha. We know the incidents when Ashoka visited the Mahabodhi temple, the Vajrasan, and he fainted because he was so much struck by that place that he couldn't stand. He was so, shivering. And we know that whenever Babasaheb Ambedkar thought about the Buddha, his eyes, his face filled with the tears. That was the fascination of these two giants towards the great Buddha. Towards the Dhamma, Ashoka used this word Bahujan Hitai, Bahujan Sukhai. And we know that Babasaheb Ambedkar defined the Buddha's Dhamma in terms of Bahujan Hitai, Bahujan Sukhai, and Lokanukampai. Both had a very strong feeling for the Sangha as a kind of the model for the new world. Ashoka was very much for the unity of the Sangha. And we know that both of them worked for the public good and good governance. Ashoka created hospitals and, roads. He planted medicinal plants and, dug well around the, highways and so on and so forth. So many things he has done for the public welfare. And we know, of course, Babasaheb Ambedkar had done so much of a public good in terms of, constructing a lot of public conveniences throughout our country, airports, and, we can talk about in terms of dam, hydroelectric projects, and so on and so forth. His labor laws. So we can look at that, very clearly. Then the methods to resolve the conflicts. I'm not going to go much into that here, but I'm going to spend a lot of time in there. But just to give you a few key terms, which are very important. Dhamma Vijay, Pacha Vekhanna, Samavaya, Dekho. These very interesting terms. And we are going to look at that. On the other hand, Babasaheb Ambedkar has talked about just peace, social Indo-osmosis, reflective thinking, and seeing clearly. Now, both of them believed in the rule of law. In fact, Dhammalipi, the whole entire edicts of Ashoka were called Dhammalipi. They were preaching not only the Buddha Dhamma, but also the rule of law. And we know that Babasaheb Ambedkar was an immense supporter of the constitutional means. And spreading Dhamma, both of them thought that Dhamma is the service to mankind. And Babasaheb Ambedkar similarly said that the Dhamma is the service to the mankind. So where do these two giants meet? That's the question. And as I told you that Ashoka referred in his royal rock edicts and pillar edicts about the welfare and happiness of the public, of the Bahujan. So they use the word Bahujan, many people, Bahuno Janassa, and Hitai and Sukhai. You find that in the Ashokan royal edicts. So that's where they meet, where they both are committed to the welfare and happiness of the public, the Bahujan, the majority, immense multitude of people. That's what they were committed for. And I just wanted to put it in the grab of the new terminologies. Both of them had this education. Like we are going to see why Ashoka issued the Dhamma edicts, and he says that I have done it to educate the masses in Dhamma, to teach the people the Buddha's Dhamma. So I'm going to tell you more about that. And agitate, two of the words that are very important in the writings of Ashoka. Parakrama, like, great striving. You cannot do anything without parakrama. And in fact, this word comes into the writings of Ashoka at least two times. So he talked about the parakrama two times, making great efforts. He says nothing is possible without making the great efforts. Nothing is possible if we want to uplift the people. That's he called Utthan. So these two words, they have become my favorite words now, Utthan and Parakram. And of course, organize. We have seen that how Ashoka was built on organizing. He organized his bureaucracy around the Dhamma. He organized his bureaucracy around the rule of law. He created new officials in order to propagate his vision of the rule of law. And that's very interesting. And we can similarly find in Babasaheb Ambedkar. What for? Educate, agitate, and organize. That's the important question that we will be looking at. Justice, a very key concept in Ashokan writings and Babasaheb's writing. We of course know that Babasaheb Ambedkar was the embodiment of justice himself, and his house was known as the Palace of Justice in Savki Koti. And we know that the justice is a bundle of liberty, equality, fraternity, dignity, and integrity of the society. We cannot have liberty, justice without this. So we can see that these things parallel together, and I'm going to show you how it is done in the writings of Ashoka and writings of Babasaheb Ambedkar. And this is what Ashoka in fact said, that Dhammalipi is for Bahujan Hitai and Bahujan Sukhai, for the growth in the Dhamma. Dhamma Ruddhi, Atha Hita. That's what he says. Hit and Sukha, he says. And Dhammarit is, of course, his missives or his letters, which were inscribed on the stone for generation to come, to last forever. So what is the Dhamma according to Ashoka? So in the Pillar Edict 2, these are the points that he makes about the Dhamma. And I think this is very important for us to understand. This is a formulation of Shila, Samadhi, Pradnya, and Karuna. For example, Ashoka says, reducing as much as possible the number of harmful actions which produce demerit. That's of course Shila. Sabba papasa karnan. Okay, doing no evil, doing no harmful action. Okay, sabba papasa karnan. And kusalasa upasampada is of course likened with samadhi in the standard teachings of the Buddha, which is like of performing as many meritorious action deeds which produce merit as one can, like compassion, daya, liberality, dana, truthfulness, satya, and purity, sochaya. So we have seen these four words in the first presentation that I made to you in the first session of our seminar. And then he said that I have also given the gift of insight, chakkudana. In many ways, I have made people to see what it is. I have given them the gift of insight, that is the pradnya. Okay, so pradnya is the way to see things as it is. And Ashoka says that I have endowed people with chakkudana. Chakku is of course an eye. Dana, eye represents seeing correctly, seeing properly, and seeing is of immense value in the thinking of Ashok. So I have also given the gift of insight. That's what Ashok says in the Pillar Edict 2. And Shila Samadhi Prajna is what can be implied from here. But he goes further. And that's very important. He goes further and says that I have also given the gift of life to all that is living. Compassion. He has given the gift of life to all that is living. And I think that's very important for us to understand that Ashoka has given the gift of life for all. Now, coming to this, his summary of the Dhamma is Sila, Samadhi, Prajna, and Karuna. And we know that similar things exist in Babasaheb Ambedkar's writings and his presentation of Dhamma. He used the word like Shila, Prajna, Shil, Karuna. Right? Samadhi can be gleaned from the Buddha and his Dhammas, like Samma Sati and Samma Samadhi and Samma Vayamo in the Buddha and his Dhamma. But we are not going to go into that because, I just want to bring to you how fascinating it is to see that their thought processes run parallelly. So let's go further in terms of Ashoka's love for Dhamma. Ashoka was so committed to the Dhamma that he said that it is difficult to realize happiness in both this life and the life hereafter unless one has a great love for the Dhamma, the greatest prudence, the highest form of obedience, and the greatest fear of sin and greatest energy. So you can see from here that Ashoka has a tremendous love for the Dhamma. And of course, his goal was to protect the people in accordance with the Dhamma, implement measures in accordance with Dhamma, secure happiness in accordance with Dhamma, shield the people from evil in accordance with the Dhamma. And we have seen how broadly he defined the Dhamma. And as we have seen in the previous sessions, that his arising in the history of the world was like a watershed. He was the first who used the Dhamma in this sense. And after that, we have seen how the counter-revolution has tried to create many versions of the Dhamma, which were in contradiction to what Ashoka has brought into the world. So this is what is Ashoka's love for Dhamma. And then, Ashoka says that Dhamma is a way of life for progress. If we want to really have a progress, we have to have the Dhamma. And he says progress can be achieved with the Dhamma. Only with the Dhamma progress can be achieved. That's what Ashoka says. And he says we cannot achieve the progress by fanfare or display of power. He says if a king or the ruler shows displays a lot of things to show that he is powerful and he is great, it is not going to do anything, any progress. Isn't it? And that's what Babasaheb Ambedkar did all his life. In one way or another, he was teaching the Dhamma. He was teaching the ethics. He was teaching to see clearly. He was teaching to analyze perfectly. That's what he was doing. He was not displaying any prowess. So, as we can see. And what Ashoka says is also true about Babasaheb Ambedkar. There is no Dhamma way of life without abiding by the rules of good conduct, Sila. And we know that Sila was the foundation of the social democracy in the scheme of Babasaheb Ambedkar. No Sheela, no social democracy. And we cannot create, the free society. And this is very important. He says, not regressing is as good as making progress. This applies to Babasaheb Ambedkar. He says, I brought this caravan here. If you cannot take it ahead, at least don't take it back. So we can see that both of them knew something that they have done for the world, that they have brought some changes in the world which were positive. And if we cannot take them forward, we can even if we can maintain it, it's something. Now, this is an interesting thing that is going to form the heart of my presentation here, is enlightening self and society. This is what both of them aimed at. And reformation of the mind of man and the mind of the world. That's what Babasaheb Ambedkar says. That is the greatest thing the Buddha has done in the world, is to tell the world that world can be only reformed by the reformation of the mind of the men and the mind of the world. So we are going to look at how they have done it. So there are basically 5 domains as to how the countries should, relate with each other. And that's, of course, the zone of conflict. And that's what Babasaheb Ambedkar, when he wrote Buddha and his Dhamma, he made the conflict as the basis for, understanding the Buddha's Dhamma. And he was aiming at the conflict-free society. He was aiming at the harmonious and the peaceful society. That's a very important point. And that's what Ashoka was trying to do. And that's what we are going to see. How, he worked in order to create the harmony between the nations. Very interesting point. Then pasandas this is a very interesting concept. At that time in India, we don't know whether they were the religious groups, but we can today, in the context of our today's discussion, we can say that they were like ideological groups. And Ashoka says that between them there has to be communication in harmony, and we're going to look at all these terms like three practices for victory. Then we are going to look at pasandas, ideological groups. That time there was no concept of religion. There were several groups who were advocating several methods and several ideologies, which Ashoka called pasandas. This word was there for a long time till it was replaced by the word religion in Indian context. And all groups, Savva Nikayesu, how we are going to create the harmony between all the groups. All the groups should live in the harmony. And the method to achieve that is a reflective thinking. We're going to look at that as to what Ashoka meant by that and what Babasaheb Ambedkar meant by that. And the people, in the society, there are different people like the religious groups, leaders, old people, criminals, women, and low class people. What both of them recommended? They recommended rule of law, justice. This niti word comes in Ashoka's writings, welfare, utthan, and how an individual, manushya, can achieve the liberation, can be reformed. So you see, there are these five areas, and when I was looking into the matter, particularly Ashoka's writings, I came up with this, five ideas in a sense of how Ashoka talked about them and what sort of methods he used in order to achieve the harmony between all these constituents groups in the society, and what Babasaheb Ambedkar did. And you see, what I'm going to show you is actually they match to a T perfectly. So, for example, unit. So, for the countries, how to create a harmony. For Babasaheb Ambedkar, it was just peace. He was not just for an animal peace. A peace has to be based on justice. That's what Babasaheb Ambedkar was advocating in the World War II. That the countries which were against whom the war was waged has to be told that there will be a just peace. Because of that, because in the First World War, there was no just peace based on the justice. It led to the Second World War, and that's what Babasaheb Ambedkar was achieving. A very fascinating word in the writings of Babasaheb Ambedkar, just peace. And in the writings of Ashoka, just peace is replaced by Dhamma Vijay. And I'm going to show you how beautifully Ashoka has crafted this term and idea, Dhamma Vijay. Very interesting term in the writings of Ashoka. And for ideological groups, how to resolve the conflict between ideological groups. For Ashoka, it was Samavaya. And Ashoka says the harmony is the blessing. Samavaya, very interesting term. And I'm going to elaborate all these terms in the presentation today. For Babasaheb Ambedkar, it was social endo-osmosis, that no groups should be separated from each other. There has to be the permeable wall between the different groups, which he termed as social endo-osmosis. The society exists in communication. Without communication, no society exists. And in all the groups, how do we create the harmony between all the groups? The term used by Ashoka was Pachyavekkhanna. And Babasaheb Ambedkar used the same term, but in English as a reflective thinking. And the Buddha used the same word, Pachyavekkhanna, when he taught Rahula. And this sutta, Rahulavada Sutta, also appears in the writings of Ashoka, and it forms a significant part of the Buddhism. Various people in society, like the teachers, the parents, the slaves, or the servants, and so on and so forth. For them, Ashoka recommended the welfare schemes, and we are going to see what kind of schemes he recommended, similar with Babasaheb Ambedkar, as to how the different relations can be managed. And for the individuals, we have seen that Ashoka recommended seeing correctly, clearly, and also Babasaheb Ambedkar recommended Samadhi, right view. And this is a very, very interesting thing that has a bearing on today's discussion. So, how to resolve the conflicts between the countries? So, Ashoka gives a very clear picture of it. He says that you can resolve or you can have a victory by three means: war. And he talks about the Kalinga War. And he talks about what has happened due to the violence in Kalinga War, how many people were killed, and what it led to. And he feels remorseful, as we have seen, that he in fact says sorry for waging a war against Kalinga. And he doesn't recommend Hinsa. Very interesting. That's the first way by which you can resolve the conflict, war or hinsa. Secondly, you can do it through prabhav or influence. Use the word prabhav or influence. So there were like the unruly tribal people who were causing problems for the highways and so on and so forth. So Ashoka didn't wage a war, but he told them that if you don't behave, I have to use the force. So the calculated use of the force can be sometimes useful, if not the full-blown force of the violence, at least some calculated force. And Ashoka, in fact, does it. He says that, if we don't behave according to Dhamma, I am going to use some kind of a force. That's Prabhav. So we can resolve the conflict through Prabhav. The third and the most effective way, according to Ashoka, to resolve the conflict between the countries is Dhamma Vijaya. He says, by the victory of the Dhamma, by the Dhamma, we can win the other countries. And in fact, he shows how he has done it in his empire. And it's very beautifully said by Ashoka. He says what happened in the southern states, what happened in the northwestern states, the Greeks and all, and how he has won over them through the Dhamma. He didn't attack them. He only asked them to follow the Dhamma, act according to the Dhamma. That is it. And in one of his edicts, he says how he launched the medical missions to the southern states and the northwest. So we can see that, Ashoka, in fact, he ruled by the Dhamma. And he says of all the victories, the greatest victory is achieved by the Dhamma Vijay. And it gives the lasting and more, joyful feeling than the two victories that, he writes about. So I think this is an interesting thing, that resolving conflict between the countries, he shuns hinsa. He's not in the favor of violence. He says that we can do it through prabhav, and in fact, he uses the word prabhav, influence, to contain the unruly people in his kingdom. But the most important thing he says is Dhamma Vijay. And we can see, actually, this topic is so fascinating that you can see how Ashoka achieved the Dhamma Vijay. And he defines how, it's actually a Digvijay. That's how you win the whole world, all the countries. We cannot win the people over by the force, by the hinsa, but we can do it through the Dhamma. And that's what Ashoka says. And I think this is a very interesting point that Ashoka has come up with. And that's what Babasaheb Ambedkar says. If you look at the Buddha or Marx, it's the same thing that is, said by Babasaheb Ambedkar. So you see, Dhamma Vijay and the just peace. I said, that Babasaheb's way of resolving the conflict between the nation was based on just peace. Ashoka's was based on Dhamma Vijay, and that is what Ashoka says. And same applies to Babasaheb's thought process. War is not a solution. War harms all the people and it causes grief to all. This is what Babasaheb Ambedkar says in the Constituent Assembly. He says, if we have a civil war in this country, we cannot live peacefully. He says the war will destroy the very thing that we are fighting for. And he says that there should not be civil war in the country. So he says war harms all the people and it causes grief to all. Even when the war is waged, affects a few people, it should not be waged. Even for the sake of a few people, even it affects a few people, it should not be waged. He says classes in conflict all over. It is better to forgive those who hurt us. That is the standpoint of Ashoka. He says that if I will forgive you if you are hurt. But let's not keep that animosity. Let's go beyond that. Let's go and live according to the Dhamma. Let's become the citizens of the Dhamma Rajya. Ashoka says unruly should be treated in a friendly way and persuaded with reasons. The unruly should not be dealt with force. That's what Ashoka says. But should be ensured that they should reform of their own so that there is no need to kill them. How beautifully Ashoka worded it. Self-restrained and imperturbable and lenient. That's what how we should have our course of action. Self-restrained, we should have to practice restraint, imperturbableness, not to shake, remain steady and lenient. Win them over by Dhamma. That's what Ashoka says. That's what Babasaheb Ambedkar says. And Ashoka achieved the Dhamma Vijay in 4 directions. Ashoka created the greatest empire. This word is not good word. He created the greatest state in the world without force. He only applied the force for the Kalinga, war, and then he had a remorse, and then he won the world through his Dhamma Vijay. And both of them are very much wanting to emphasize that exemplifying the Dhamma within, instructing the people in Dhamma. We have to embody the Dhamma within, and we have to instruct the people outside in the Dhamma. Now, that was about the conflict between the nation. How do we resolve the conflict between ideologies, Samavai, and what I call the social endosmosis? How to bring the disparate groups to talk? That is what is. First, we look at Ashoka. Ashoka says that we should have what he says guarded in speech. We should not let our tongue flow just like that. We should be very guarded in speech when we criticize somebody. He says that we have to assist each other. We have to learn to assist each other. And he says that there has to be meetings between the disparate groups, whether they are different castes for the today's context, or different groups or different ideologies. We have to find the ways to meet together, come to the table together. And he says that each ideological group should have the freedom to develop scholarly doctrine and auspicious doctrine for all. So if there is an ideological group, Ashoka will encourage them to come through the very clear understanding as to what they are thinking. I think this is what Babasaheb Ambedkar would do. He would ask you to define what you want to say. What is it all about? The Brahmins, he will say, what is Brahmanism? Everybody, he will ask, define clearly what they mean by what they are practicing or preaching. And in the process of that, communication with other groups, they can realize, what is the truth. So this is very important to resolve the conflict through the process of Samavai. And these are the points given by Ashoka. And we can see same in Babasaheb Ambedkar's writing and speeches. He recommends the comparative study of the religion. As we know, that he has studied so many doctrines very deeply. He was a very thoughtful listener to others. And that's how you create the harmony. That's how he created his own constituency among the different ideological structures or the systems. So this is about how to resolve the conflict between the various ideological groups. And how to resolve or bring together or work for the welfare of the various groups. The practice is Pachavekkana. Pachavekkana means the reflective thinking. Pachavekkana means reflecting back as we do it in the mirror. And what Ashoka says is very beautifully put here. He says, we have to assess the needs of each group individually. I think that's a very important point, because the needs of the various groups are different. We cannot have the same assessment of the needs of all the groups. So what Ashoka says, assessing the needs of each group individually. Now, this is for the researchers. They have to go out in the field. And Ashoka, has actually talked about the field work. He says that we cannot achieve the progress unless we go and meet people. He says that, I want to directly meet people, but I cannot do it. So I have to create the indirect system of issuing this Dhammalipi. In fact, Ashoka would have talked the Dhamma all the day, throughout the day, with as many people as possible. But he couldn't talk to everybody. So he has to find the indirect ways through his Dhamma bureaucracy, through his edicts, to reach out to the people. So you see, assessing the needs of each group individually. That's what Babasaheb Ambedkar did. What is the need of the Shudras? What is the need of the scheduled caste? What is the need of the women? And so on. So that's very important, assessing the needs of each group individually. Assessing the specific situations of all groups in society. What is their specific situation? You see, Ashoka was far beyond his time. This is what, these tools are so contemporary. Assessing the specific situation of all groups in society. All groups are to be honored according to their specific needs. So you give the group what they need. They have to be honored like that. The most important thing is to meet each group in person. See how, Ashoka wants to know directly. He doesn't want to know, through the indirect source. That's what we want to know the condition of various groups directly. So that's the beauty of Ashoka, and that's the Pachavekkana. He used the word Pachavekkana. The word in his edict is Pativekkama. Now let's move on to reforming society, various people in the society. So Ashoka was against violence, and Ashoka was against superstitions. And he says that, I'm not going to welcome superstitious behavior in his domain. Because there was a system of melas or samaj, where people used to come, kill animals, and do whatever bad things there. And Ashoka said that I am not going to encourage the Samaj or the assembly of the people coming together and enjoy, just like melas that we see today. So he was against violence. He said that no living being should be slaughtered for the sake of sacrifice. And that was one of the reasons why the Brahmins attacked his kingdom. Nor should the meetings be held. He said that there should not be any religious or ideological gatherings which creates the kind of harmful situation. So he stopped that. He says service to people, as I have told you, medical provisions for human beings, medical provisions even for the animals, provisions for medicines stocked and planted, and public good like roads, wells. So you see, we have to find a ways to help people. And same thing we can find in Babasaheb's approach to the social service or welfare. And this is a very interesting term, Dhamma Mangala. He was against the rituals. He said that the right rituals and practices are like this. We should have a correct attitude towards the servants and the slaves. We should show respect towards the parents. That's what Ashoka says. These are the correct and the right rituals. Self-control in dealing with the living beings. We should practice self-control and generosity towards the learned. Whoever there are learned people, scholarly people in the world, we should have the generosity towards the learned. That's what the Dhamma Mangal is all about. And how to practice the Dhamma for self-enlightenment, like how we can practice for ourselves the Dhamma. And that's what Ashoka says. This word is so contemporary, dekhna, dekho, that means to see. And we find this word dekhanti, dekh, in Ashoka's inscriptions. So it's a practice of seeing. So what Ashoka says, it is easy to see one's good deeds. We can dekh our good deeds. Oh, I have done good. But he says it's difficult to see one's faults and wrong deeds and hence bad karma. It's very difficult to say. When we analyze ourselves, we only think that we are doing good to the world. But when we do bad things, we don't acknowledge it. We don't see it. Ashoka says, please see to it that, when you do good, bad things, you see all that. But he says it's very difficult to see one's own faults. However, we should train ourselves to see that negative mental states like fierceness, cruelty, anger, pride, jealousy will lead to wrong action and destruction. So he's saying that, in fact, we have to, manage our minds. We should not let the negative mental states like fierceness, cruelty, anger, pride, jealousy will empower, take over us and lead to the wrong action and destruction. He says, further, we should see in a way that good deeds bring happiness here and thereafter. So you see, we should see clearly as to what brings happiness and what brings the sorrow or suffering. There is a play on the word here. Ashoka means no sorrow, means joy. Harsha. Another name of the Ashoka can be, Harsha, full of joy, somebody who is full of joy. So you see, this is a very interesting point that if we want to cultivate the self-enlightenment, cultivate our own personality, cultivate our mind, in the scheme of Babasaheb Ambedkar, we have to be able to see the good deeds done by us, what kind of a good deeds we are doing. But at the same time, what Ashoka says that it's difficult to see one's faults and wrong deeds and his bad karma. However, we should train ourselves to see that negative mental states like fierceness, cruelty, anger, pride, jealousy will lead to wrong action and destruction. That's what Ashoka says, and we can see the similar scheme in Babasaheb's thought process. So let me go back to the summary of this. As I told you that in order to resolve the conflict between the countries, we have seen how Ashoka emphasized on Dhamma Vijay. He didn't approve the violence. He didn't approve the influence so much. He approved the victory based on the Dhamma, and the similar concept in Babasaheb's writings like just peace. For in the conflict between the ideological groups, there has to be communication between them. Samavai, social endo-osmosis in Babasaheb's scheme. Pachavekkana for all the groups and reflective thinking in Babasaheb's scheme. Various people in the society like parents, our servants, or whoever they are, welfare schemes for them, treating them with compassion and the welfare state, and for our own awakening, for the Manushya, it's very important for us to have the clarity in the vision, to see as it is. So I find this structure very interesting and very important as to how, both of the giants meet together. So let me go on to the good governance. We know that both of them were committed to the good governance. We don't have to talk much about Babasaheb Ambedkar. We know that his whole thinking was about good governance. When he drafted the constitution, when he intervened in the constitutional law of this country, beginning from 1919, his aim was the good governance, responsible government. And we see similarly in the Ashokan thought process, he says that the government accountability should be there. The assemblies, which monitor the sort of the public welfare. The assemblies, for their part, will order the officers responsible for calculating the receipts and expenditure to do so in the greatest detail. You see, what is the heart of corruption? Now, what is the heart of the bad government? Corruption, embezzlement of the money, using the money wrongly. And what Ashoka says, he says that the accounting should be proper in the greatest detail. That's how you make anybody accountable. And this is what I found very interesting in terms of the good governance in Ashokan's scheme of the things. And then this is, I think, very important concept in Ashoka, which is there in Babasaheb so much. I'm not talking much about Babasaheb because, as I'm talking about Ashoka, you can all relate with Babasaheb Ambedkar. So bringing out Ashoka is very important in order to, make sense of how these two giants of the personalities meet on what ground, what common ground. So freedom in Ashokan thinking, equality before law. He says taking care of the well-being and removing any form of obstruction for those among them dedicated to Dharma. He says that people should have a freedom to practice the Dharma. We should remove any impediments in their way. He says minimize the effect of imprisonment. He said, in the case of people who are arrested or the children, minimize the effect of imprisonment. It should not cause a lot of harm to the society. And he says, bound by all kinds of ritual obligation. If people are bound by any obligations, it's our duty to free them from those obligations. So that's what Ashoka says. Freedom and social justice. Ashoka talks about the freedom for everybody to be free from suffering. I think that's a very deep concept of freedom. That freedom from suffering. And that's the heart of freedom. And this freedom is possible for all classes only if they strive diligently. You see, the second time he used the word parakrama. It's a very interesting word for parakrama, for Ashok, greatest striving. Parakrama. Without parakrama, no freedom is possible. And renunciation, sacrifice. We have to, be able to sacrifice. So two things very important in Ashoka, parakram and sacrifice, which are essential for achieving the freedom. And he says that this freedom is very hard for the higher classes. He says for the people, low classes, as we have seen that in the scheme of Ashoka, there is no Varna system. He uses the word high and low class, poor and rich people, but there is no such thing as Varna in any of his writings. But he uses the word highs and lows and says that for the people, for the low people or lower classes, it's very easy for them to achieve the freedom because they have something to strive for. That's what Babasaheb Ambedkar says. That there is a hope in Dhamma for the people who are poor. The Dhamma might not be needed for the people who have already everything, but it's must for the people who doesn't have anything. And they have the highest possibility to be free. So that's what Ashoka says. What I thought in the conclusion of my presentation is Ashoka Niti or justice. And I wanted to bring it to you because Ashoka used law and education in the Dhamma as the two pillars of bringing the transformation. And we know that in Buddha and his Dhamma, Babasaheb Ambedkar talks about the law is for the minority and Dhamma is for the entire society. Isn't it? So how does that appear in Ashoka's Niti? Ashoka Niti talks about Niyama, Dhamma Niyamana. Dhamma rules like certain animals should not be killed. So he gives the list that these are the laws you should not break. He gives the list of the laws that should not be break. He says Dhamma Niyamana. You behave according to the rule of law or the Dhamma rules. You cannot break them. Secondly, he says that I am educating you in Dhamma, persuasion. And this is what Babasaheb Ambedkar says, that only way to win people, by persuasion or by love, by compassion. There is no other way. You cannot win over the people by force for a long time. We have to use the love and persuasion. And Ashoka says something very important, that I had brought the Dhamma Ruddhi or progress in the Dhamma by two ways, by the Dhamma Niyamena and Nijatiya. Now, some people have translated Nijatiya as a meditation. Some scholars have translated as a persuasion. And of these two, Ashoka says that Nijati is can sustain the progress. So he is in the favor of persuasion, means teaching the Dhamma, training the people in Dhamma, education in Dhamma. He thinks very important. And as we know in the scheme of Babasaheb Ambedkar, educate stands at the helm of his philosophy of transformation. So I think this is very important, the Dhamma Niyam and Dhamma Nijjati. To come to the conclusion, I wanted to bring to you a lot of things, but in the course of such a short period, it's not easy to bring all these things. Maybe we will have a full course on Ashoka and Babasaheb Ambedkar in the future, but I just wanted to give you some idea about both their detailed approach to the Dharma or Dhamma. So in the Bairat inscription, Ashoka gives the list of the 7 texts that he recommends to both the Sangha and the Upasakas. And we know that Babasaheb Ambedkar has written the monumental, the Buddha and his Dhamma. And there we can compare. Ashokan writing is of course very small, very less compared to Buddha and his Dhamma, but we can find a way where they can connect. So I just wanted to bring these important points here in terms of Buddha. What was Ashoka's position related to Buddha? He took the total refuge in the Buddha. If you look at Babasaheb, you look at the Buddha and his Dhamma, larger section of it is devoted to the Buddha. And he has, we know, taken the total refuge in the Buddha. Dhamma, as we know, that Ashoka has prescribed the 7 texts, and he prescribed Dhamma throughout his rock edicts and pillar edicts. And we know that Babasaheb Ambedkar has written extensively. Buddha and his Dhamma is there. There are other writings of Babasaheb Ambedkar. So we can find a way, like these 2 sutras that are mentioned among the 7 texts, Sariputta and Rahulovada Sutta, they're both, we find referenced in the Buddha and his Dhamma. And the other text we have to think through as to how they can relate. And the Sangha, unity and purity of Sangha matter to Ashok. He said that if you create division in the Sangha, you will be debarred and you will be forced to wear the white robes. And he, in the Sangha, he brought also he brought in the officials and the ladies. Some people say that Ashoka wronged there, he interfered in the matter of the Sangha, but we don't know if Ashoka had not done what he has done, what would have happened to the Buddhism in the world today. And of course, Babasaheb Ambedkar thought of Sangha, reformation of the Sangha in terms of, model of a new society. He said that, there has to be new Dhamma Sevak who can be paid and married. So you see, these are all the questions that were important to Ashoka, that are important to Babasaheb Ambedkar, and those questions are important to us. So I just wanted to, open the text, both of them, their personalities, their thought processes, their methods to bring about changes, transformation in the world. I just wanted to open it up so that we can think through a lot of things. And last but not least, we have a method which is given by Ashok and Babasaheb, which is about, the real victory can be only achieved through the Dhamma Vijay, force or, influence. They can be used, but they have their limitations. The only way by which we can reduce the conflict in the world is through Dhamma Vijay. Second, Samavai, we have to create a situation where various groups can come together and, discuss things in harmony with each other. And that is what Samavai. Pachavekhan, reflective thinking, we have to reflect. We have to know the needs of each individual groups, what they want, what is their unique situation, and based on that, what can be done for those groups. And it can be done through a very proper research. That is Pachaveka and reflective thinking. Welfare is, of course, at the heart of both of them. They both wanted to extend all the services to the humanity. And for individuals like us, it's very important for us to open our own eyes to what is good and bad. Both of them will say, as the Buddha says, Yehi Passi ko come and see. They will say, see, dekho. Ashoka will say, dekho. Babasaheb Ambedkar will say, see. So I think these 5 sort of, the methods that both of them employed are so useful to us even today. We can use them. We can propagate them. We can talk about them, and we can definitely bring about the change that both of these giants of the people wanted. Let me bring you back to this very auspicious day of tomorrow, Ashoka Vijayadashmi. And I found this very fascinating, this particular newspaper, front page for Buddha Bharat. And it's according to what we are discussing. On one hand, there is Babasaheb's quotation. On the other hand, there is Emperor Ashok's quotation, and we have seen how they relate to each other. So I think that, I don't know how if anybody has done this kind of a comparative study between these two giants, we talk about Ashoka, we talk about Babasaheb, but we generally talk about separately. And as we have seen in the previous two sessions, as to how, where they come together, what was the thought process of Ashok, what was the thought process of Babasaheb Ambedkar, and in this, I have tried to show you that they had a very similar thought process even when they were separated by the 2000 years of distance. And we can elaborate many things further as to Baba Saheb's conception of democracy, justice, how that relate to Buddhism, and how that relate to Ashoka, and how that can all be tied to the teachings of the Buddha. We can definitely do that. But maybe that's for the future. I will stop here and open our session for any discussion or any comments or anything that you would like to add to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mangesh.
Yes.
It is the comparative study we never read before. I'm feeling that Babasaheb said that the new wine in old bottle is different. I'm comparing like that.
Right.
Insightful information. Very nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Alkata.
Mangesh sir,
Yes, Akendraji.
the way you preach us the comparative study or Babasaheb and the Ashoka is really fantastic, and
Thank you.
it was first time for me that it was really fantastic and beautifully you did so well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone? Anybody else? Yes, please feel free to comment. You can also criticize, it's an open forum.
Excuse me,
Sunil
brother.
Kumar ji. Yes.
I am Sunil Kumar from Hyderabad.
Yes, sir.
Actually, in the present situation and the previous time also, if you see that people are fighting for very silly reasons, either it is Ukraine or Russia and this Israel and this thing. Actually, we have seen that nobody is born with some property and then when die, they will not take anything.
Right.
And Dhamma talks about the, equality and well-being of all the people in the world.
Yeah.
And that's why the Buddhism is the most appropriate to follow in the present context and in future also.
Yes.
And people are just fighting. They are not thinking that why we are fighting for no reason. They are also human beings. We are also human beings. Either it is your Jews or that one, or maybe Ukraine also was part of Russia, USSR, and they are fighting for no reason actually.
Yeah.
And killing each other.
Yeah.
Thank you. And the talk is really nice. And I am many times I am attending and going through the messages, whatever you are posting. It is really nice to gain some knowledge from enlightened people like you. And even our sister Alka is also there. He has given a talk one day, and really nice to be with all the people like you are there. Thank you very much. Thank you. Jai Bhim. Now Buddha Jai Bhim.
I'm very delighted to do this sort of things because I think
there's
a lot of things that we need to know, and there is a lot of things that we need to bring out even today. I think what I have done in these 3 days is just touch the surface. I would say just scratch the surface. There's so much to study and understand, Sunil bhai.
Yes. Actually, it is very difficult for a person to read all the books written by either Babasaheb or many scholars.
Right.
And if like you have studied some books and you are sharing the knowledge with us, if the similar way other people like they have studied something and then they are sharing, it will be easy for all of us to gather some knowledge. It means at least 10% of the things which are available in the world, for us.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sunil Kumar bhai. Anybody else?
Hello, Mangesh.
Hariputta bhai.
Okay. Yeah, Namo Buddha Jai Bhim. Very wonderful series and very informative and well thought, well read. Congratulate.
Thank you, sir.
One thing I want to ask you that you spoke that there was 7 texts that was prescribed by Ashoka. Can you elaborate on them a little bit?
See, there is there are no two scholars will agree on what they really are, except the two texts. One is Upatis Sutra, is about is Sariputra's teachings. So,
Okay.
so that is identified. Then the second is Rahulovada Sutta. It's a very interesting sutta. So these two are identified. Then there is one Muni Sutta,
Mm.
Moneya Sutta, that's four. And then there is Arya Pali, something like that. I can give you the list of that. I don't remember it now. But one has to do with the people say, scholars say that the first is to do with the Dhammachakra Pravartana Sutta. But no two scholars have agreed. Okay. And then there is like that makes about five. And there are two more. And they are not identified. But one scholar has put a tentative list of that, and I have written about it. And I will send you that entire thing as to what Ashoka taught in that. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
See, howsoever similarities you have explained
Hmm.
between Babasaheb Ambedkar and Ashoka. But Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar at one place has criticized Ashoka
Yes.
for being ignorant about Brahminism.
Yes.
Being a king, it was possible for him to eliminate Brahminism, he says.
Yes, that's what we know. That's true. That is true.
So this is what I wanted to.
See, we are familiar with Babasaheb's criticism of Ashoka, but we also know that Babasaheb Ambedkar was very fond of Ashoka,
Yeah, that's there.
isn't it? So
I was taken aback when I came across with such version.
yeah. So Babasaheb was very
Because
fond
I
of.
was thinking Babasaheb cannot criticize Ashoka.
I think what happened, the Brahmins at the time of Ashoka, as we know from the Ashoka's writings, they were very small and minority group, and they were they were the part of Ashoka's administration. Like they were like these horse people looking after horses, people looking after elephants. So they are classified among them.
So he was ignorant about their activities,
Because that
even
time
anti-social activities.
they were not that
also.
big that time, I think, because Ashoka didn't talk about Varna in his.
Yeah.
So we don't know. All these things have come up now. A lot of research have come up now.
Yeah.
But it's a good
Okay,
thing.
thank you.
Actually, I was
Thank
aware
you,
of
but
that, but I
we-
thought, let's not bring the conflict between these two.
We should continue such lectures from time to time.
Okay. Good.
Mm.
Nicely explained, but
Yes. Anybody?
जय भीम सर।
जय भीम सुनील।
मैं बिहार से बात कर रहा हूँ सर।
करो बिहार से बात करो। आप अशोका की जगह से बात कर रहे हो।
सर एक्चुअली जो आपने एक्सप्लेन किया, दिस द फर्स्ट टाइम मैंने गो थ्रू किया आपका एक्सप्लेनेशन का। मतलब आई लाइक कि आपका जो रेफरेंस था आपने गो थ्रू किया अबाउट अशोका, हाउ अशोका वाज थिंकिंग अबाउट द पीपल एंड जस्टिस। बट इसमें बेसिक हमारा ये क्वेश्चन करना है कि हम लोग अशोका और बाबा साहब या बुद्ध की हम बात करते हैं कि उन्होंने ऐसा किया, ऐसा कहा। बट हमें जब लोगों से मिलते हैं तो जो लोग खुद बुद्धि की प्रैक्टिस करते हैं, बाबा साहब की प्रैक्टिस करते हैं, उनके पास खुद टॉलरेंस नहीं है, उनके पास खुद मतलब फॉरगिवनेस नहीं है। तो एज ए न्यू अगर हम एस्पिरेंट है कि हम किसी को फॉलो करें, तो कहीं ना कहीं हमारे मन में कॉन्फ्लिक्ट आ जाता है कि अगर बुद्धिज्म को प्रैक्टिस करने वाले उनके पास ही खुद सेंस नहीं है कि हाउ टू बिहेव, हाउ टू फॉरगिव, तो हम किसको आइडियोलॉजी मान के हम कैसे प्रैक्टिस करें? फिर वो हमारे मन में आ जाता है कि जब इतने बड़े बड़े व्यक्ति हैं, ये इस तरह से वो पहुंच चुके हैं और बहुत सारे लोग उनको रिस्पेक्ट भी देते हैं, इंस्पाइट दैट दे डोंट हैव सच लाइक द क्वालिटी एंड लाइक ऑल अबाउट दैट, बट पीपल उनके पीछे भागते हैं। तो हमारे लिए जैसे नए व्यक्ति के लिए इट्स अ बिग क्वेश्चन कि हम कैसे अपने लाइफ को मतलब आगे हम बढ़ाएं। ये मेरा सवाल।
इसका जो सवाल है वो हम लोगों ने देखा प्रेजेंटेशन में, जो टर्म अशोक ने यूज किया, देखो,
यस,
खुद देखो, ठीक है। और बाबा साहब ने बोला है कि आप खुद के प्रकाश, आप स्वयं हो। तो अगर हम किसी को देखेंगे और उनको देख के अगर हम अपना जीवन यापन करेंगे तो इतना सही नहीं होगा। तो जैसे अशोक का एग्जाम्पल है, अशोक ने बोला कि जो मैं पढ़ाता हूँ वो मैंने अपने जीवन में उतारा है। राइट, बाबा साहब ने अपने जीवन में उतारा है जो वो बता रहे हैं।
Yes.
तो बहुत बार ऐसी होता है कि लोग इतने नहीं होते, अप टू डेट नहीं होते अशोक और बाबा साहब के इतने, लेकिन हम लोग जो है, आपकी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी हो, अगर आप
Yes.
दूसरों को देख के आप अगर अपने मार्ग से भटक रहे हैं, तो उनका इश्यू नहीं, आपका इश्यू
Okay.
है ना?
हाँ।
ओके।
और मंगेश जी, सबका जो प्रैक्टिस का लेवल जो होता है वो अलग अलग होता है ना।
राइट राइट राइट।
तो वो भी एक बात हो सकती है।
तो जो टेक्स्ट ऑफ धम्मा जो है सारिपुत्र साहब, विच यू आस्क्ड मी, सो अशोका रेफर टू दिस 7 टेक्स्ट. One is Vinaya Sammukasa, that's one text. And another is Ariyavasa, noble living. Then Anagata Bhaya, fears in the future. Muni Gatha, Gatha of Muni. Moneya Sutta, Sutta on Muni. Upatissa Passina, the questions of Sariputra. And Rahulavada, instruction to Rahula. So these are the 7 texts. I'm going to send you the detailed note on that. Okay?
Yes, yes. Thank you, thank you.
Okay. So anyone? Okay, if anybody has any comments to make or anything to share, please go ahead. Vidyanand, you want to?
Mangesh, this is
Yes,
Vidyanand.
yes, Vidyanand.
For living, anybody needs certain resources.
Yes,
And most of the fight throughout the history between humans has happened because of crisis of resources.
yes,
During Ashokan times, as you had rightly said, the and to maintain that resources, trade, commerce, industry do play a very significant role in the society. So, from Ashokan inscription, can you cite any reference where we can have some insights over how trade, commerce, and industries were maintained during Ashokan times, and it deeply embedded with the Dhamma's philosophy?
See, Ashoka was a typical ruler when it came to rule. He needed taxes and he taxed his people for sure. But he might have, we are very sure that his taxation might not be unjust. Secondly, he has income from another sources like from the elephants. So he used to, in that time, they used to train the elephants, and Indian elephants were very, very much sought after commodity, like, the tanks today, because that was the war machine of the ancient time. So, that was one source of income. Another was from gold, because we know for sure that there were gold mines, and one inscription is found near the gold mine in South India. So Ashoka, of course, had resource to the minerals for sure. And Ashoka facilitated the trade and commerce. That's why he cautioned, he warned the people of the jungle not to disturb the people plying on the highways and all. So Ashoka's time, we know that, and his relationship in Greece, and he has a friendly relationship all over the places. And of course, India was at the helm of the power that time. As we know, that Patliputra was the largest city in the world that time, 10 times bigger than any other city in the world. And it was a very rich society. Ashoka was, of course, having, leading a very prosperous sort of an empire. According to the legends, we don't have the proof of it, that he donated the Jambudvipa 3 times to the Bhikshu Sangha, to the Sangha. And we know, according to legends, Ashoka didn't refer to 84,000 stupas in any of his inscriptions. But we know that, from the evidences, we know that Ashoka built 84,000 stupas. It needs a lot of money. So, of course, Ashoka was a very rich ruler and maybe the most powerful ruler of that time in the world. And when it comes to the Ambedkar movement, today we know that we have dearth of the resources. But we have, that time there was no way to acquire power. But today we have, at least in theory, there is a democracy, right? And if we can mobilize people properly, have a proper sort of harmonies between various groups, break down barriers between the people somehow by practicing all those methods which are taught by Buddha and Babasaheb Ambedkar. Have a parakram. That's what the word used by Ashoka, the greatest striving and, sacrifice, renunciation. And I think we can also mobilize, have recourse to the political power. That is what happened in UP at one point of time, right? So I think the matter of resource is there. We need to have trade and commerce. We need to have access to the power. These are all big questions, right, Vidya? So we have to deal with them separately. But I'm sure that, the situation of Ashoka was different. The situation today is different. So we have to, in a different situation, We have to use Pacchavekkhana reflective thinking as to what best we can do, right? Okay. Any other things?
Hi, I have a question.
Yes, Pritam, go ahead.
Which Pacchavekkhana relates to mindfulness?
Pacchavekkhana, of course, relate to mindfulness because you see, all these terms have multiple meanings. So in the meditation tradition, it's like thinking on an object created by your own mind. I don't want to go into the technicality of that, but this human mind is endowed with what is called the reflective thinking. So unlike animals, they cannot reflect back on their mental states. They cannot reflect back on the world. They can only reflex, right? So we are endowed with reflective thinking. We can reflect back on it, like the way the mirror reflects. And of course, the Buddha used this simile of a reflect when he talks about reflective thinking. The reflective thinking we find in a great detail in Dewey's thoughts. Dewey talks about reflective thinking, the only valid thinking to create knowledge, to produce knowledge. And I find it very interesting that we find a similar thought process or the thinking methods in the Buddhist literature and in Ashoka's writing, and of course in Babasaheb. So it relates with mindfulness as to how we can take an object and reflect back on it.
So we can practice it
We can
by
practice.
journaling.
We have to practice it. We have to practice what Buddha taught to Rahul. Reflect on our bodily actions, reflect on our mental thoughts, reflect on our speech.
Yeah, so we can practice Pacchavekkhana through journaling, through writing.
Yes. You can reflect back in writing. When you think deeply about something, you are practicing Pacchavekkhana.
And have ever Ashoka ruled Andhra Pradesh?
No. He didn't rule Andhra Pradesh. He ruled part of Andhra Pradesh for sure. And that time there was no term like Andhra Pradesh, but there is a mention of Andhras. In his inscriptions, there is a mention of Andhras. So Andhras must be a very separate class of people. But of course, that time there was no Andhra Pradesh as we have today Andhra Pradesh.
So how was his relationship with the Southern Indians?
It's a good amicable relationship. He won them by the Dhamma Vijay. He didn't conquer them. He didn't attack them. He ruled. He won over them by Dhamma. That's what he says.
They also practice Dhamma.
Yes. They also practice Dhamma. And there is now, I read, one of my friends was mentioning that there was a medical mission. Of course, Ashoka talks about medical missions to South India and the northwest of India, where he sent medicines, where he sent plants to all the places. So, and there was, of course, trade and commerce, very peaceful trade and commerce. So they said that in Tamil Nadu, there is a mention of Ashoka's, medical sort of a facility which was created by Ashoka in South India.
Great. Can I ask a question I had related to?
Yeah, please.
Chandragupta Maurya, it's not Chandragupta Maurya. So they say that he was China, but I don't get it. Why would he go to like South India and die there? And actually,
We don't know. See, Ashoka could have written a lot about himself. He was an emperor, like what the emperors in other parts of the world did. They wrote their prashastis, praising themselves, boasting themselves. I am such a such great man, and my father was great, and my this was great, and that. Ashoka never did it. Ashoka lived anonymous. He didn't talk much about him except in context of the Dhamma teaching and what he wanted to do, right?
So he haven't mentioned his father.
No. We don't know where he died. People say he died in Gulbarga, Kalaburgi, but we have no evidence of whatsoever.
ओके
Sorry, Putra.
मंकीराव
Yes.
एक विचारायचं अजून मला की जे क्रिटिक्स जे आहेत ना क्रिटिक्स फ्रॉम द Brahminism or often argue that Ashoka squandered the resources and government funds reckless, and that led to the inflation of treasury at that time.
Yes.
So sometimes they argue that this action is extravagant spending and it's a really conceived idea and unsustainable by Ashoka. So how do we see this, and how much since you go through many texts and his edicts, how much truth in this?
I didn't get your question because the voice was breaking. Can you repeat your question again?
Okay. I see that critic often say that Ashoka squandered resources and spend.
That's a Brahminical propaganda.
I know that is from opposing camp. But since you have gone through tape and his edicts, how much truth in this?
No. There is no truth in that
How
because
do,
you see, actually,
because we have to argue in another way. That's why I'm asking the question.
see, we do not have any records of what the people after Ashoka did, and whatever Ashoka did, we have all the evidences. And he was so influential that he had a positive effect on the Indian history. After him, a lot of emperors wanted to model themselves after Ashoka. And Shotoku, Prince of Japan, he thought that he's Ashoka, and he gave the Japan his first constitution, Shotoku. The Tang dynasty celebrated Ashoka like anything. They even practices the the festival, 5 yearly festival. That's what Ashoka started. Even Harsha practiced that. And they were all socially and publicly responsible. So, this propaganda of Brahmins, they hate Ashoka so much, thinking that, he has done so much. He stopped animal sacrifices, he stopped superstitions, and so on and so forth. So, we see that today, how we have seen in the last session as to how the Hindu forces hate Ashoka even today. Right? So,
Yes,
it's a propaganda. There is nothing like that.
Mm.
We have
And
because of Ashoka only, because of his whatever he left behind. Our physical history start with all his writings. There is no other writing. There is no proof of what language Vedas were having and all. There is no material proof of anything.
And I read we should know what of Ashoka and Maharashtra and other places.
Okay.
चित्र जे आपल्याकडे प्रत्येकाकडे असलं तर
Your voice is cutting. Anyway.
अच्छा मेरा नेटवर्क शायद क्लियर नहीं है.
So any other person before we end our session today?
Hello, sir. Just one reflection that I was just stuck my mind that like as we read today in the lecture that where did the two giants meet, that is for the welfare and happiness of public. So I just was just contemplating about the resources that both of them have. Like Samrat Ashoka was an emperor, like he had a whole kingdom to himself, and through his like he had a position of power, we can say. But if we see Babasaheb, like he went abroad to study, then he came back, and he did not have any, you can say, legacy behind that. He has some resources or something like that, and still he was able to achieve all these things, and that is why we are comparing them on an equal status. That was a very inspiring thing which I felt from this comparison.
Yes. As you saw, Nikhil, there is so much that we can glean from studying both of these giants. And I think in the future, maybe, more and more people will look into this, bring out, because I think, bring out comparison between these two people need a lot of textual studies of, I think Ashoka's writings, making sense of them. As the scholars say, no two scholars agree on a lot of things. But we have the context of Tripitaka to understand Ashoka and the material history to understand Ashoka. And, there are very fascinating studies on Ashoka's edicts, the language used, what kind of a language used in one place, what kind of a language used in another place. It's a very fascinating area to study. And I encourage all the young people to really do that. It's very, very, it yields a lot of fruits if we do study these people in that light.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
So you talk about Gandhari Prakrit. Is it different from Magadhi Prakrit?
The inscriptions are same in the Prakrit, but the script is different, Kharoshti. But the edicts are the same, the content is the same, and the language is the same. But there is a variation of a few alphabets here and there, and we can discount that.
So how hard is it to learn for an Indian? Like who can
You
help
can
me?
master Pali very easily if you work for 1 month continuously. I don't think it's a very difficult language to master. Like I don't want to talk about myself, but I in 98 I appeared with Pali as an optional subject and I passed UPSC in 1998 thanks to Pali. And I didn't have a lot of time, 2 months,
That's great.
top to top. So I think it's not difficult. If I can do it, I think I'm sure you can do it. You are more an intellectual, as I can see, Pritham.
I know.
So tops
And
tops 2 months. You give dedicated efforts. Tops 2 months. That's it.
and how do you read script? Like
Pali has no script as such. So I
so
was reading in
how you
in
write it?
Roman script. I will recommend you some books. Okay.
Okay, sir. And Prakrit, is it different from Pali?
The same little variant.
Same. Okay.
It's like not like Sanskrit. Sanskrit is like filled with so many rules. Eight
Yeah,
thousand
this is
rules.
complex.
8,000 rules. It's a dialect. Pali is a dialect. So it sits on your tongue. With a
Yeah.
minimum effort, now it just comes to you. All right. How many bodhisattvas are known to us? Kindly elaborate. I think that's a separate discussion. Vinod Bhai, we will take it up in the next course of discussion. Can you suggest some other books and text to reflect further upon Ashoka and his thoughts? Siddhanti, are you part of any of our WhatsApp groups? Is Siddhanti there? No. Okay, I think you can get in touch with either Nikhil or me, and we will put you. I will put up all the text there. Okay. Then okay. Okay.
I would suggest start with Charles Allen book.
Yeah. Yes. Great book. Okay. So we come to the end of our 3 days online seminar comparing Babasaheb Ambedkar and Ashoka. I thought it's very apt and important for us to talk about these two great people because Babasaheb Ambedkar turned the wheel of Dhamma in motion on the very auspicious day of Ashok Vijayadashmi. And we have seen from these Prabuddha Bharat as to how both of them were, on the same, their quotations were on the same front page, and both had the same aspiration, both had the same fascination and love for the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. And it's very fascinating to look at their thoughts. Personally, I found it very fascinating to look at the thoughts of both the giants. And I think we should encourage the study of these two great personalities in the future so that more and more people can benefit from their lives, their personal example. Ashoka is, personally very inspiring. So is Babasaheb Ambedkar, and both of them find the Buddha very inspiring. So you can imagine what kind of a person Buddha might be. So I think it's a part of a process that we have started long time back, like 5 years down the line, right, Nikhil? To bring about this kind of topics in discussion and talk about them, mobilize more people. So we'll keep on doing that. You stay in touch with us, and we will have some fascinating workshops and seminars in the future. So Nikhil, do you have anything to say before we end it?
Yes, sir. So basically, it was a very good week overall that we could reach a lot of aspects, and the presentations were also very helpful. I hope you will share them all together after this. And those who have missed the session 1 and session 2, as well as if any of your friends want to watch the recordings of all these 3 sessions, it is available on YouTube channel, and wherever you have got the invite link. In that group also Mangesh sir will be sharing, so
Yes.
you can have a look.
Yes. So thank you all. Jai Bhim, Jai Ashok, Namo Buddhaya, and see you in the future.
Thank you.